Welcome to the Piston Fanatic. I am your host, Dave Dalton, and I'm excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I've been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. I've also coached a varsity basketball team that was very successful in northern Michigan. Currently, my daughter and I are coaching one of the best AAU teams in the country. Well, it's almost here, fans. This is Thursday, where I'm recording this Thursday around noon, and this coming Tuesday, we're going to have the lottery. We're going to find out where we're going to pick. But in today's episode, I'm going to go talk about the draft in general, and then I'm going to give you my big board for who I think the Pistons should and how they should rate these players. Not necessarily how everybody would rate them, but how they would plug into the Piston team. So before we get started with the draft, I'm just going to quickly touch base on a couple things. The coaching search, it's been, told that reports are that Monday they interviewed one of the three finalists, Kevin Ollie, and then Tuesday maybe Jaron Collins, and then Wednesday Charles Lee. So I think each day they're out in California with the owner and with Troy and with Tom Gores. And so there's a chance that we could know by, the end of this week, they could hire a coach. They could have a coach in place by the lottery, or they might not. So they might not be blown away. I'm sure they're real confident in these three guys because they made the finalists. But there have been some other places where Budenholzer got released and got fired. And so it'd be interesting. Some people try to speculate. Charles Lee has been an assistant there. He's been there for like 8 years with the Bucks. And so they know him really well. And so if they think that he's potentially a really good coach, then maybe they would want to hire him. And if they don't hire him, is that saying to us that, they had him in-house all these years and they don't think that he's that great? So that doesn't necessarily always the case. Some programs, some organizations want to get somebody who's been a head coach, had head coaching experience, and has been successful. So they, could be looking at somebody else. So, but I just wanted to talk, there's been some controversy on Piston Nation about Kevin Ollie, and a lot of people are not for hiring him. And I'm one of them. But my thing is not that just, he coached in college, and I think I mentioned before that, he got fired at Connecticut. He won a national championship first year he took over. And, he had the previous coach he had their players, and then he got in trouble recruiting. Well, he did recruit those great UConn teams when he was there because he was an assistant. So, but anyway, he got fired, and then he ended up suing the university, and he was awarded $11 million. So I don't think he was that guilty of anything outrageous. And I think I heard that one of the worst things he did was he set up phone calls for his recruits to talk to former UConn players that were playing in the NBA. So, but my thing is, so Jaron Collins, and we've seen this, Jaron Collins and Charles Lee, they have worked their way up. So they've been, a lot of these guys that are real successful, they're real young coaches, but they started out at a very young age. And they were like the video coordinators. So they dug into the film and they studied and they went, painstakingly through every detail when they scouted these teams and prepared film for their teams. And then the next step was player development, which again, Jaron Collins and Charles Lee were deeply and still involved with player development. But they gradually moved up. And so they've had all that experience. So even though they are young, experience counts, and they've been in the NBA. They've been breaking down all the teams in the NBA for years now. And I think that gives you a good perspective on things. And so I think they will be more prepared to jump in, and they already know, what plays the other teams run and what the tendencies are for each player on the other team. And Ollie would learn that, but I mean, he's not been involved in that for years. He's not been part of an NBA team. So that's my take on the coaching search. Again, I think I would love to have, I think Jaron Collins now is my first choice, but I'm not, just like the draft, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to explain to you about my perspective on that, but I don't have access to, if I interviewed those three coaches, I still could pick the wrong guy, but I would have certainly a better idea than just going off sketches that I read about what they've done and what other people that were involved with them have said about those coaches. So now with the draft, it's been interesting. I love the draft. I love the NFL draft and the NBA draft, especially the NBA draft. And so I I didn't have access. There weren't all these podcasts before, and there weren't all this information, and there weren't all these draft experts. I mean, now there's millions of them. There's all these guys that just all year they break down players. They break down players from every different area. So I'm going to talk about that first. So it is really challenging to evaluate players based on where they're playing. I mean, there's some people say that like the G League has these guys who many of them have played at least some time in the NBA. They're better, bigger, stronger, better athletes than even college. So most G League teams would beat most college teams. Having said that, I think when you're playing high-level college basketball like Brandon Miller, you're playing at Alabama, those coaches are really trying to win. In the G League is more of a developmental thing. They're not focused on winning. They're moving players up back and forth from the NBA back to the G League. I think it's just a different thing. There aren't fans in the stands. I mean, in the SEC where Brandon Miller played, the stands were packed. People were going berserk. It's crazy. And the coaches are dissecting. You play only like 2 games a week, basically, sometimes 3. And so they spent a lot of time preparing. So people were trying to really shut down Brandon Miller because he was the number one option. And we're going to talk more about Brandon Miller later. But I'm just saying that high-level, big-time Division I college basketball is hard in many ways, even though there's players on the G League that have more talent. Then there's Overtime Elite. And, if you watch film of Overtime Elite, it's not good basketball. The guys are 16, 17, 18, 19. And so the Thompson twins, they're all both 20. So they're playing against guys that they're older than all of them. And so that's something that it matters. The competition isn't great. And so you watch the film and there's just breakaways. They'll show, when you watch anybody's highlights, you'll get to see a lot of dunks of any of these guys. There's a lot of great athletes in this draft. And so you get to see the highlights, you get to see these guys dunking. But in Overtime Elite, there's like nobody within 10 feet of them. And when you see them making passes, and Asur and especially Amen Thompson can make phenomenal passes. They're fun to watch. But it's like when you watch the All-Star game, it's just like, a free-for-all. Everybody's just running up and down the court trying to make cool passes and cool plays, and the defense is questionable at best. And so that is really hard to evaluate them. Now, I will say this. I don't want to be completely hypocritical. It bothers me that Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, they got people didn't vote for them for the All-Star game because they were on a bad team. And I contend that, you can't just exclude them because they can't help what team they're on. Just like you can't say, give Scotty Barnes all the credit for playing for Toronto, had a really good team, or Keegan Murray that played with 2 All-Stars on the team that had the second best record, and he had a bunch of other really good players. So good that there were times in the playoffs Keegan Murray played very little. So I don't want to say I'm not going to exclude the Thompson twins because of that. But I do think it does make it harder to see exactly what they do and to evaluate that. And even I'm not sure that everybody every night in the G League played hard, and a lot of them are playing for themselves. I think Scoot's team Ignite, they didn't have great shooters. If you watch their tape, they didn't have great spacing. And so anyway, that's just what I just wanted to quantify when I talk about these guys, that it is difficult. And the big one I want to talk about is Shaden Sharp. So I still will go by, and I'm proven wrong. I always say I've been more right than I've been wrong. But Shaden Sharp, last year I really wanted him. My hope last year was that we had the 5th pick. I was hoping we got to trade the 7th pick to Portland for Jeremy Grant, and I wanted 2 of the players, Shaden Sharp, Jaden Ivey, Benedict Mathurin, or Keegan Murray. So those were those four guys that were in that range. I was hoping that the Pistons would come up with two of them. We ended up being very lucky that we got Ivy, and then we got even more lucky, I think, that we were able to get Duran with the 11th or 13th pick. I should know that, but I don't remember for sure now. But um, anyway, in my life, again, I've watched the draft. I followed the draft, and everybody will say, how the Pistons should have taken this guy. And there's some of the ones that really stand out that we drafted Stanley Johnson with the 8th pick, and Devin Booker was picked later. Well, everybody can say that now, but I will say this, and I have people that can vouch for me. Before the draft I said the Pistons should take Devin Booker. And he wasn't picked till the 13th pick. We took Stanley with the 8th pick. And so a bunch of NBA teams passed on Devin Booker. And he was kind of a skinny kid, and he had a lot of potential. And again, I'm not a draft expert. I don't have access to all the information that guys today do. And it's not my livelihood. So, but I just read things. I just read about what he could do, what a phenomenal shooter he was. I read that one guy said potentially he's like the best player in the draft, or one of the best players, that he has this enormous upside, even though it's going to take a while. And it's come to fruition. He has been just out of this world, man. In the playoffs, he is just lighting it up, and he can hit threes, he can hit tough jumpers, and he can take it to the rim. He is just, I get a big kick. Some Piston fans, they think, because he goes around wearing Piston gear or Red Wing stuff, and he's still, he's from Michigan, and so they're hoping that he would want to come back because he's a Michigan kid. But I'm not holding my breath, and just like I'm not holding my breath, everybody wants us to get all these good guys like Mikal Bridges, or Jaylen Brown, and there's every team in the league wants those guys, and so including the teams that already have control of them, so they're going to want them. Another player, though, Luke Kennard. When we took Luke Kennard, I'm yelling at the TV. I'm sweating bullets because I want Devin Mitchell, and then we take Kennard, and Mitchell goes the next pick, and I'm screaming at the TV. And the big one that, I wanted Therese Halliburton, and I'm watching the draft, and I'm sweating, and I'm nervous, and I want Therese Halliburton so bad. And sure enough, our pick is coming up. Therese Halliburton's still on the board. I can't believe he's still on the board. And we take Killian. And, again, I just looked at his stats. Therese Halliburton was like, his assist to turnover ratio was like 6-1. He shot like over 50% on twos. He shot over 40% on threes with decent volume. He's like over 80% on free throws. Everything I read about him, he had a tremendously high IQ, basketball IQ. But, he slid way later in the draft. He was picked like 13th again, and Killian was picked like 7th. And so it's an imperfect science. Any expert that picks people makes mistakes. I will also say that, a lot of people in Piston Nation hate Andre Drummond. I'm going to tell you, I wanted him so bad in the draft, and I was sweating bullets again, and I hoping he fell to, we were picking 9th that year, and we got him, and I still contend that was a great pick to get him at 9. And, he's one of the greatest rebounders in league history. There certainly is an aspect that those big guys like him are no longer as valuable, and their plus minus isn't good. And, but I think a lot of his, just the look on his face and the way that he kind of lumbered up and down the court, people, I think, mistook that for lack of effort. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think that you can rebound at the high level that he did. And I'm not saying he's the greatest player, but to get him at 9th pick, here's another one. You could say I was completely wrong, and I didn't think that he was necessarily going to be great, but Sekou. So Sekou was picked with the 15th pick, and he was the youngest player in the draft, and it was just, when you're picking at 15, I just wanted to go for upside, and he had a lot of upside, and he did great in his workouts. But I think it's really hard even for Killian, but Killian grew up, I think, in Florida, but Sekou, comes from another country. He's very immature. Things just didn't work out mentally. I think he got discouraged. He had that one tremendous stretch his rookie year where they finally let him play, and went on a tear he played against LeBron. He had like 24 points on very few shots against the Celtics. He had like a 6-game stretch, and then they benched him, and then he never really got to play more than like 10 or 13 minutes after that. I'm not saying that he would have been good. I'm saying that where we picked at that time, I thought that was a gamble, good roll of the dice. And that's what, when you're picking 15th, I'm all for that. Hoping that you get somebody like Siakam. He was picked later. And of course, the greatest, Giannis, was drafted later. A lot of great players were drafted later. I think Kawhi Leonard was like 18th pick. Clay was like 11th pick. There's history of players. We got the 31 first pick, the first pick in the second round. Nick Claxton, who I love, was picked 31. And another guy you all know, Bogey, he was the 31st pick in the NBA draft. So now I'm going to go through the players that are available and who we want. And I'm not going to spend that much time on Wemby. And I mean, that's the dream. And he is 7'5" or 7'4" with an 8-foot long wingspan. He is skilled. He has, for a guy that size, he's got really can handle the ball great. He moves really well. He's really fluid. He's very bright and articulate. He speaks a bunch of different languages. He does art. His whole life has been devoted. His whole surrounding family and his team, they devote everything to him becoming a great player. They don't even have him lift a lot of weights because they don't want him to overtax his joints and things. And they have a physical therapist that travels with him every day. He does physical therapy every day, especially like on his feet, so that he's not going to have problems with that. So he had that big game against Overtime Elite where he put on a show and he hit amazing, I don't know if he was 7 for 9 on threes. He scored a ton of points, but he hasn't shot that great. He plays in that it's a real good league in France, and he's played really well. He leads the league, I think, in rebounds, scoring, blocks, and he's been sensational, but he doesn't shoot. He shot the three. I think he's like 32%. And I think he will get better. I like his stroke, and he's got a big advantage, man. Nobody can put a hand in his face because they can't reach that high. So he's going to be able to get lots of good looks. So if he continues to progress, and like I said, I like his form, and you can tell a little bit about a guy's form, but he shot 85% on free throws. So that tells you a lot. But his instincts defensively are amazing, and he just can block shots, and he anticipates. He has great timing, and that he has 8-foot wingspan. And so when you move well and you anticipate well, and even though he's not an explosive freak athlete, he is a really good one. So that's the dream. We have a 14% chance of getting him, which I felt like it was worth, especially after Cade got hurt, it was worth tanking just to have a 14% chance to get a guy like that, because they come along never in history. So this next thing I'm going to talk about, and there's, again, this huge debate all the time, and maybe you're tired of hearing the debate between Scoot and Brandon Miller. And I love both players, and I think both players are great. And I guess I'll talk about Scoot first. He is only 6'2", so that's a down. That's a negative. He plays bigger. He's so strong. Did you see the picture? You got to Google it, man. I think he put it on TikTok. He is like a Greek god. He's got a six-pack. He's just like no body fat and just this unbelievably toned muscle. And he's explosive. He is fast. He can go from 0 to 100 in a blink of an eye. And that's, there's some people that are fast once they get going. And but there's basketball speed and there's regular speed, and Scoot is both. Scoot can start and stop and go so fast. He does have another great thing. He's being only 6'2", 6'9" wingspan with huge hands, and so those are Those are attributes that come in handy when you're an NBA player. So he averaged like 18 a game and 5 rebounds and 6.7 assists. He is an elite passer. And I watched him play, and he would make the simple pass it was a good pass. He passed quickly and when people were open, but he also can make the tough, hard passes, and he can get into the paint anytime he wants. Some people have said he shoots the pull up jumper too much, but he's got a decent pull up jumper, and so that's a good weapon for him. But um, he shot 34% on threes, and I know I sometimes with these guys you see different stats and different percentages, and you just don't know exactly. But the fact is he's not a great 3-point shooter, and I don't think he shot high volume. So here's my thing, and I will lump Scoot with the Thompsons. Those guys, Scoot has played 2 years with in the G League for Ignite, and the Thompson twins have played 2 years for Overtime Elite. Those guys, they live in this bubble. Like, it's not a bubble, but their whole life is like kids going to college, and they have to go to class, and then they do all these other things. And these guys, their whole job, they get paid, but they spend 12 hours a day is focused on basketball. They are well aware of the fact that their shot is not good, and so they've had 2 years to work on the shot, and especially not so much Scoot. His shot looks like it has some potential, but it hasn't been good. But the Thompson twins, their shots are a train wreck, and so people can improve, and we've seen some people. I can't remember now who was the guy for the Pelicans that came into the draft. He's an amazing defensive player. I should remember his name. He came into the NBA as a rookie last year. He shot unbelievably well from three, and the Pelicans have a great shooting coach. Now Oklahoma City has a great one. They have the guy that was at San Antonio. But anyway, he shot great last year, but now he's regressed back to the mean. He's back shooting like 25% on threes, and last year he shot, I think, in the upper 30s. And so shooting is, it's real hard. All these guys that say, oh, yeah, they'd be a great player if they could shoot. And, and that's a concern for Scoot. So he's got two concerns, 6'2". How many great 6'2" players are in the league? I don't know. Not very many. Try to think of them, Chris Paul. But Scoot is elite. I would be afraid not to draft Scoot. But for the Pistons, and my contention is going to be, I would take Brandon Miller. And, one other person, before I go on, I'm talking about shooting. It does intrigue me. So Jaden Ivey, his shot was not good. So that's one of the reasons I wanted Shaden Sharp ahead of Jaden Ivey. So Shaden Sharp, people didn't want him, and the only reason they didn't want him is because they didn't get to see him play enough, because he didn't play his freshman year of college. He went to Kentucky, but he didn't play. But all we knew is that his vertical was 49 inches, the highest ever recorded. Michael Jordan's was 48 inches. And also, Shaden Sharp has a beautiful stroke. And, at the end of the year, so he had and again, it depends on what team you play on. He played with Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons, and Jeremy Grant. And those guys chucked it. I mean, they shot a lot of shots, and even when he played with them, Shaden Sharp didn't get to play all that many minutes, and he kind of went off to the side of the court, and let those guys do their thing. I mean, he was just spaced the floor. He did what he was told. Well, when they shut them down and Portland started tanking at the end of the year, Shaden Sharp was scoring like 27 a game. And if you watch ESPN, man, he had highlights. Man, his head was over the rim and his arm was like 3 feet above the rim, and he had the best dunks of the year, in my opinion. So if you just Google Shaden Sharp's dunks, you'll get to see it. But, Scoot is explosive. He can dunk it. He can get up high, and he's got, again, that long reach, which I think is going to be to his advantage on defense. He is, by all accounts, he is a dog. He is just relentless. He's competitive. He hates to lose. He fights on defense. And so, I think still teams can try to get a switch and get him on a taller guy, and NBA players are really good. So I just I know that if we pass on Scoot, I know that I could end up hating myself the rest of my life. But of course, I don't get to make the choice, so it doesn't matter what I think. But I think that it's scary to pass on Scoot. But with Brandon Miller, 6'9", 200 pounds, 7-foot wingspan, 20 years old. He's older. I mean, he's older than Duran, but he averaged 18.8 points. That is a high number in college. Players, especially when they're playing on top teams, which Alabama, his team was number one in the nation most of the year, and that's a huge number. Very few players average 18.8 points a game, and he got 8.2 rebounds. So that's a huge thing to me too. Not hardly anybody averages 8 rebounds in college. There just aren't as many possessions. They're just like in the NBA. The floor is condensed. The game is 8 minutes shorter than the NBA game, and so and then the thing that I think that people are that you don't hear enough about is his passing. His superpower is his 3-point shooting. He shot over 40% most of the year. He had a terrible NCAA tournament, so in 3 or 4 games, his shot was so bad that his percentage dropped to like 38%. But he can shoot off the catch. He can shoot off movement. He's got a beautiful, smooth stroke. But his passing is, I think, underrated. He averaged 2.1 assists, and as many times as he touched it that he shot it in a college game, that is a high number for a leading scorer. But he's an 86% free throw shooter. So there's again another thing that it's a real thing that you shoot that good and from the free throw line. So, but he's smooth and he's fluid, and he's just can quick release. Like I said, great off movement. So at the beginning of the year, the first 9 games or so, he didn't score at the rim. He was bad, and just like Jaden Ivey improved so much during the year, he had this dramatic improvement at getting to the rim. He listened, I think, to the critics, and he just really improved his efficiency at the rim, the number of times that he drove to the rim. Like I said, his playmaking, I think, is way underrated. I think you're going to love if he's a Piston. He's more than a solid defender. He's tough. Nate Oates, his coach, said he's the most mentally tough player he's ever coached. I do think that at the end of the year, that when he was struggling in the NCAA tournament, that he was getting lots of attention for the incident where one of his buddies took a gun out of the backseat of his car that wasn't his gun, and they killed somebody. And so people were threatening his life, and he had to have bodyguards with him everywhere he went. And I think that was a big factor of why he was so bad at the end of the year. So people compare him to Jabari Smith Jr. that played last year with he played at Tennessee, I think, but he was drafted number 3. He was projected to go number 1, but he shot the ball at elite level. He might be even taller than Brandon Miller a little bit, but he was the best shooter in the draft, just like Brandon Miller. And guys are coming for these guys. Like I said, Alabama played in SEC. Those guys were scouted. People knew that you can't let this guy get an open 3, and so they were trying to stop him, and they still were successful. But I think that Brandon Miller is a lot more fluid than Jabari Smith. He has a lot more wiggle in his game. It's not great. He's got, I think, better handles than Jabari had. And Jabari was a good defender, especially on ball. But I think that Brandon Miller has the potential to be excellent on defense. I think he may not be all defensive team by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that he will be really good. So what I'm saying is, you got these 2 guys, and I'm always for taking, in most instances, taking the highest upside and the talent player. And I don't think that you draft by position, except when you got 2 players that you have that basically are even in your mind. They're really, really close. Then I say you take the one that is the best fit. And again, Scoot has he's a freak of nature. Some people say he's a generational talent like uh, Wemby, but I just do recognize he's 6'2". He isn't a good shooter right now, at least. And again, I go back though, Ivy dramatically improved his shot. I'm excited to see how much that goes. But a lot of guys never do, and a lot of guys even they look a little bit better. But I'm intrigued always by why Ivy's form was not good. He's improved his form this year, even during the course of the season. But I just don't know. His mom was a coach, coached in the NBA, played in the WNBA, is a great coach at Notre Dame and very successful. But I don't understand why she didn't have a shooting coach for him or somebody that worked on his form because his form again was flawed, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted Shaden Sharp above him. But he did improve his shot, so I'm saying Scoot can improve his shot. Amon Thompson can improve his shot, but I I just don't want to risk that when we know we have a guy like Brandon Miller who is going to be elite. So my comps for Brandon Miller are Mikal Bridges, and I think he'll be even a better three-point shooter than Mikal Bridges, and Jason Tatum. And those are great players. And I think that there really are similarities, and I think that he has really high upside, and I think he has really good fit. So the other thing about Scoot, obviously, that the why there's so much controversy is we have Cade and we have Ivy, and those guys are best with the ball in their hands. They're both unbelievable at passing the ball and sharing the ball. But what do you do with three guards? I have said that you can have, the two guard positions. There's 96 minutes. 48 times 2, and so if you could split and everybody could play 32 minutes, which is a good amount, and you just play those three at the two guard spots. And the Pistons did that when they had Vinny. They had Isaiah and Joe who did play significantly more minutes, but they never played a fourth guard. They played those three guards and they rotated them. And I'm going to get in this more later, but I think that we always want to have Cade or Ivy on the court at all times. And when Cade's not in the game, Ivy takes all those minutes and has the ball in his hands the whole time that Cade's out. So I think it can work, but I do think there is a little bit of redundancy having Scoot. And like I said, I would be fearful that I passed on him. And then, because like I said, he could be one of the best ever. So he is, like I said, he's really strong. He just got a great playmaker. He's just got all the all the intangibles, they say. So anyway, the next player we're going to talk about, so that's 3. So now number 4. And so this is where it gets real sticky for a lot of people. Most people have Wemby and Scoot and Brandon Miller in their top 3. But there's a lot of debate where the next 4 or 5 players fall. So I am going to go with Cam Whitmore. And there is a picture out there right now showing him with his vertical, and he had a 44-inch vertical. I mean, he is like jumping so high. I mean, he's the angle of the photo is just remarkable. It looks like he's like flying through the sky. So if you get a chance to go on YouTube to look at that, or just Google that, he's a phenomenal athlete. But he's like about 6'7". 232 pounds, and he's chiseled. He has 6'11" wingspan, but he is a freak athlete. Now, he had things that, he had a thumb injury, missed a bunch of the preseason, and we saw how much that hurt Cade his rookie year when Cade had that ankle injury and missed preseason and missed the first bunch of games, and it took him a long time to get going. Well, Cam Whitmore played at Villanova, which has been a real powerhouse recently, but they were bad this year. He didn't have teammates that were good at distributing the ball. He didn't have guys that were good at spacing the floor. But anyway, Cam Whitmore is a freak athlete, so he's similar a little bit like Sadiq, only there's a huge difference that his vertical is like 20 inches higher than Sadiq's, and his explosiveness is off the charts, and he can shoot. And his shooting was a little bit inconsistent, but he didn't get to play a lot consistently. But he shot 34% on threes, 70% from the free throw line, 48% from the floor. He does more like straight line drives, but he would fit so well with Jalen with Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. He's great at cutting to the basket, and you can imagine with those two guys passing him the ball, to have a great cutter like that. He's real good on defense. You don't get to hear that. And, age isn't everything. So I'm not going to take a player because they're 18 and somebody else is 20. And now they say, like 20, you're an old man when you come into the draft. Like Brandon Miller's 20. The Thompson twins are 20. But Cam Whitmore is one of the youngest players coming to the draft. And it's not nothing, but it is something. He has more time to develop. He's doing these things at even a younger age, but I just think I'm confident in his shot. It obviously needs to improve, but I think that it will. And again, being young like he is, I think it will make a difference. And I think he's a really good fit with Cade and Ivy. So, he's good at his rotations on defense. He's really good at guarding the ball. He can get up so high. He can, his head gets up by the rim, so he can come from the weak side and block shots. I just think that he's, I've been so adamant about wanting to get a top 3 pick, and there's still a good chance that we're not going to. I mean, there's a 47% chance that we're not going to get a top 4 pick. So I think that he would be real good. I have him at 4. Most people have Amon Thompson there, and I just like him better, and because I think that he's a better shooter. I'm concerned, even though Amon Thompson is a complete freak of nature. I love the athleticism, but he's best with the ball in his hands, and so we don't need, we have Cade and Ivy, so we want the ball in their hands, and so it's just going to reduce what he does good, and so he's going to be playing off ball, and he can't shoot, and hopefully he does get his shot better, but right now his shot is not good, so I'm not for drafting him. Another guy, my surprise next guy for the 5th pick is Taylor Hendricks. So he is an unbelievable athlete, and he has very versatile on defense. So impressively, he blocked 1.7 shots per game. That's a high number in college. He averaged 15 points and 1.4 assists, which is good. He's a good passer. His role wasn't to pass the ball, but he 48% from the floor and 40% on threes, 78% free throws. So he's got a smooth stroke, good shooter. He can switch out on the guards. I love his activity. You can go, all these guys, you can go to YouTube and watch highlights and even listen to different draft guys break their games down. And I'm just surprised. So he went to University of Central Florida, which isn't a big-time school, but he was a big-time recruit. But he went there because his brother, I think he has a twin brother, and so he wanted to play with his brother. And so I'm just surprised that no bigger school said, we'll take both of you, even though his brother's not that great. It's kind of like Keegan Murray's brother at Iowa. He's going to be coming into the draft this year, but he's like 22, so I'm not sure he's going to be drafted that high. So high on Taylor Hendricks. It's interesting. Duran, he made some phenomenal blocks where he jumped. I mean, it looked like his hand was way up over the square on the backboard, but he didn't block as many shots. I don't know. I'm expecting that he will block a lot more shots this year, that he'll adjust to the game. But some guys, and the same thing with Wiseman and Bagley, they weren't great shot blockers. But I think this guy just has the knack. There is a knack for it. I have this 6'5" girl on my AAU team that is long and athletic, but she also has great timing, great anticipation, and that knack for blocking shots. So again, I think he would fit in good. I think he can even play the 3 and the 4 both. And again, he's an elite shooter that fits with, Ivy and Cade are going to find you. They can't guard the paint. They can't load up in the paint if you have somebody that can shoot it like Taylor Hendricks. So I will talk about Emin Thompson. I think I have him next. So after Taylor Hendricks, but he's 6'7", 6'9" wingspan, which isn't great. You know, most of these guys have significantly longer arm reach than their height. But he is 44-inch vertical, just like Cam Whitmore, and it might be even higher than that. He's fun to watch, but again, the overtime elite, they scored. They played in the open court a lot. Like again, a lot of their games seem to be like pickup games. But he made some sensational passes. Just really, I mean, he can be driving and looking one way and can throw that bullet pass to the opposite corner for a wide open three. He obviously loves to pass. Um, but he didn't shoot well. I mean, he shot like 29% on threes or less. He averaged 16.5. But again, their competition, you can't even look at those numbers. You just have to try to watch them play, him and his brother, and try to do your best evaluation. Like I said, I didn't get to watch Shaden Sharp. He didn't have, he had his EYBL and his AU stuff and his high school stuff, and that's how you could go by. But for him, all I went was he's 6'6", which was taller than Ivy. He had a much better shot than Ivy, and he had a 44-inch vertical. And so he was the number one player in the country for his class. And so all those things combined, even though I didn't have all the tape on him, that led me to think that he was going to be a great player. So again, it's imperfect science. Thompson is another. Him and Scoot are the two wild cards for me that could end up, that I might pass on at certain spots that might really regret. So, Jarris Walker is another guy that a lot of people like, and I'm not as big a fan of his. I think so. I have him like, I don't know if that's seventh now or eighth, but he is 6'8". He's a big guy, so we have enough big guys. He moves well for 6'8", but he's like 240 pounds. He has a 7'2" wingspan. He's a good defender. He could switch out on guys, but he's not really quick or fast or fluid. But he's he does a lot of things great, including passing and defense, which are exceptional for a guy that's his size. But he's just not the quickest guy, and so he's more of a four. And now we already have Beef Stew trying to play the four, and I think that we just don't need another guy like him. So that's I just don't think he's that great fit. I think he's going to be certainly a solid player. I think he's going to be an NBA rotational player for sure. But I just not in love with the Pistons signing him. Before I let you go, I'm just going to briefly touch on Rob Murphy. He was the assistant general manager with the Pistons. There was a big article about how great it was that he was there before, and then in October he got suspended by the team and for some allegations made by a lady that worked in the office that he hired. You can go. I'd advise anybody that's interested. There's a real good article that details everything in the Detroit Free Press. If you do Rob Murphy, Detroit Free Press, I'm sure that article will come up. But he did terrible things, and it's inexcusable what he did. My only question is, it's not still crystal clear. They suspended him in October, but they just now, recently, within the last week or two, that they officially fired him when there were all those allegations before. And I think that they didn't fire him until the young lady, and it breaks my heart that she would get treated the way she did and get away. This guy gets away with it, but he didn't get away with it, fortunately. But it's just sad that she had to go through that. She was a single mom raising a kid, and had there's things I'm not even going to talk about them on my podcast. But I just don't know why the Pistons, why it took so long, and why they didn't fire him until after she took it to court and got filed a suit against him. So don't know about that. But anyway, Tuesday, 8:30 ESPN, the most exciting day could be, change history for the Detroit Pistons, for our franchise. And it's going to be nerve-wracking. Again, I am hoping we get a top 3 pick. The dream is Wemby, and I am a little bit more confident in Cam Whitmore or Taylor Hendricks. even though they might not. And I am not. It's not going to be the end of the world if we get Emon Thompson. I just am concerned. Like I said, he's had 2 years where he's in the gym every day, and his whole job is just to work on basketball, and they know that that's a weakness. By all accounts, both the Shar and the men are great kids. They're hard workers. They're very articulate. They care. They work at it, and they still can't improve their shot. That's not saying they still won't, but it just makes me question why that it hasn't happened yet. So anyway, do something nice for somebody today. Make their day better, and go Pistons. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.